Hello, it's the big giant head today. With my lovely background, as you can see, I'm calling you from Space Station Alpha. There's a Dalek mothership just there. That's not a shelf full of rubbish. Um, and I'm going to talk to you about a possible way of submitting those predicted exam grades that we've been talking so much about. It's not finalised. Next week, got a head of faculty meeting, and there'll be some time for us, the heads of faculty, to tell me in the number of ways that I've probably got this wrong. But I'm going to find some consistent ways of being able to predict the grades that we're going to be submitting to the school. The idea is meant to be that the grades are predicted. There's got to be some good reason for them. 10 to 1, exam boards are probably going to ask for it at some point. So we need to get that prepared now. Do that now so that we're not scratching around. It's also pretty useful because we need to have a more or less consistent way of being able to generate those grades. It needs to be consistent across the board as much as possible, even though subjects are different, simply because if we get asked about it, if it's all inconsistent, it's not going to end well. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to show you something I've come up with. This is an idea. I'd love some feedback on that. You can either do that via head of faculty. If you want to feedback direct to me, just remember that expletives over email are generally monitored. So I'm just going to share my screen, and I'm going to show you what I've come up with. Right, bear with me. There we are. So you've got your reports here. You've just hopefully next week rather, you'll get your reports all finished off. You'll have written them all up, and you'll have written. What's a spelling mistake there? Might as well fix that while I'm here. You'll have written up your reports. Notice how predicted grades are no longer in the columns for A2, G1, and GS. There's a good reason for that. I think it's just going to cause confusion, because if we're predicting, say, an A, and then we go to the exam board and we predict a D, so the student gets a D or an E, then the parents can be wondering, why did we predict an A? Is that not what we said to the exam board? Well, we can't tell you. It's a secret. We're not allowed to tell you. Similarly, if you're predicting a B and you predict a B to the exam board, somebody could then accuse us of telling the kids what they get, which again, that's against the rules. We're not allowed to tell the students or the parents what we're predicting, or rather what the predicted grades that we're sending to the exam board are. Now, I'll be writing to parents very early next week to let them know this, and basically to drop a bit of a hint that maybe we should understand if a teacher does say no. So you've got your grades here. Now here's a little trick that you can do. I'm going to move my video. I'm hoping that you can still see this. But on the top of the screen here, you've got an array of icons, and one of them, it looks like an Excel spreadsheet icon. So if you click on that, if you hover your mouse over it, says export to Excel, just in case you can't see it, because unfortunately this recording system isn't quite what you see is what you get. So if I export it, say, as a text, so I click on it, export as text, it comes back as a mark sheet. Now, and when you click on it to load it, it'll give you all kinds of warnings because it's come off the web, and these things can be a bit dodgy, but hopefully Engage is not too dodgy. So want to open it. And what you've actually basically got is a spreadsheet with the reports you've just written. But here's the interesting one. It's the target grade. You've got your attainment, you've got your target grade. What you can do is you can adapt this. So the first thing I would do is maybe get rid of the comments column, and you can then start to think about what you're going to use as your evidence to calculate a grade. You've got there what you think you've given them, and what their CEM target grade is. So they can see how well they've been, so they can see how well they're doing compared to how well they should be doing. So you can start to look at the various parts. Now, this varies from subject to subject. To have just one rule wouldn't be wise. But what you should be using is primarily exam material, if possible. Preferably the mocks, but if there's other work that makes a difference, you can include that. Be suspicious of anything that's arrived after the lockdown started, as we can't guarantee that that is going to be the students' own work. But by all means, if it looks like something they genuinely did. So, for example, if you've given the students a past exam paper and it's pretty clear from the wording of it that they haven't nicked it straight off the marking scheme, they haven't just found the exam paper on the internet and downloaded the marking scheme and copied it. I had a student today whose answer to one of his one of his test questions was, allow other suitable arguments. Okay, we all know what he's been doing. What we need to do next really is to be putting that data in. Now, there are lots of different things. You could use mock exams where you get a score, it changes it adds up the score, say from 3 exams, you end up with a total. So you could end up with paper 1, 2, 3, and a total, and you can look up grades for it. Where you have things like maths, where it's fairly consistent, you might say you have 60 out of 100 there, 70 out of 100 there, and 90 out of 100 on that one, and the total would be the sum of all of those. Jobs are good, and so on, and then you could use a lookup table to create grades. You can play with lookup tables. I'm going to show you a neat little toy that I'm quite happy to let you have access to if it helps. So you could generate your grades that way. Now, what you've got here is you've got your CEM target grade, which hopefully you haven't played with throughout the year, but you have been taking note of. This is what CEM predicted when they did their baseline test. This is what the baseline test predicted that their grade would be. So the idea is meant to be that they're looking that you can use that as additional evidence. So, for example, someone's grade here might be, let's say, a B, okay? But what you can also do is you can say, well, okay, but does that match their attainment? Well, yeah, it does. It's a little bit above their target grade, but it's okay to exceed your targets. If, on the other hand, you've got, say, a D grade student here, and maybe you've been a little bit generous and you've predicted them an A star, and they're a D grade candidate, well, you're going to need to make sure that your evidence is pretty watertight. Underneath, you can even put where you got the evidence from. Okay, so it could be the March mock, it could be from, that one could be from the January mock. You know, it's designed to be so that if needed, one can see exactly how you got that grade and what you did with and what you did when what you chose as your justification, to check that justification is correct. Now, one of the other things you can do once you've got that, what you're going to need is to make a new table. And this table, at this stage, you'll probably have to make a new one to submit to various exam boards. They'll want different formats, but I think it's sensible to have a single format here. So if I've got a simple format for a table like that, oh, why is that sulking? Bear with me. So I just want to neaten up a tiny little bit. What we want is a grade and a rank. Oops. And a rank within that grade. So let's say the grades are going to be B, B, U, B, D, D, C, D, let's say. Then you'd have to rank them within that grade. Obviously, where it's going to be just the one. So, for example, where you've only got one C there, well, that can be blank because that's obviously a 1. That's obviously rank 1 within there. But here I've got 2 B grades. So what I then want to do is look at what sort of scores they got. So if I look for those 2, I'm just going to make numbers up to show you. If I've got, say, a 70, 56, 90, and the sum was, say, 216, then that might be a B grade as well. That might be a B grade as well, but you can see that's a higher one. So they would be ranked 1, and that one would be ranked 2. So I would say 1 and 2, and so on. So that's what you end up with. Now you can pretty it up if you want to put borders on it and things like that to make it easier to see. But that then creates 2 particular tables, one with your evidence and one that's just got the information that's needed, so that we're not having to scrabble around, look, trying to work out which column's the grade. One of your tables needs to look like that. So I'm going to give you an example. Now, my example is going to be my physics one. So I can give you this, by the way. I can give you a copy of this. So physics for A level is comprised of 5 papers. Paper 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I've had a quick look on the specification. I know that paper 1 is worth 15.5%. Paper 2 is worth 23%. Paper 3 is worth 11.5%, and that's worth 38.5%. That's worth 11.5% again. It's all a bit weird, but that's, that's physics. So what I've done is I've made a little gadget that turns it into a number based on that weighting. So where a student, say, got a particular set of grades, let's say that for the mock exam, mixture of B's and C's, let's say. We'll put an A in there and so on. You end up with a number, and that number is basically based on that weighting and based on that grade. Okay, so you can add all these other grades up. So maybe you got a C in that one, you got paper 3 did really well, got a B, but then paper 4 made a right mess of it, got a D, because the grade boundaries on the A-level physics seem to change quite a lot from year to year. And then we got maybe paper 5, well, that was really easy, got an A. And that will then generate, now I happen to know that the grade that I entered overall as their mock grade, based on some of these papers, was about there. I know that their CEM target is about there. So I can look at the calculated grade. Now, if I've done my job right, these 3 should more or less match. Certainly these 2 should match if I've done my job correctly. Okay, and so you can do all kinds of things. Oh, that should be, say, that should be a D, shouldn't it? So it's going to be an A, wasn't it? Sorry about that, went a bit wrong there. So I've got my set of grades there, and I've got where we're actually picked up their actual assessment from. So in a couple of cases, for instance, with the practicals, with paper 3 and 5, which were practical papers, our assessment for that was going to be done just after the lockdown started. But I did have a prior one in my mark book, which was back from October, which isn't ideal, but it's better than the sharp stick in the eye. So I'm going to use that. So I'm going to use those the grades I've got from that. The thing with using letter grades is that it's fairly consistent. Now, what I end up with is, let's say I have some more. So I'm just going to make these up now. Okay, so these do not necessarily pertain to what the students actually got. But I'm just really just going through it all. And it's just really so I can show you. So let's just take a shortcut here. Let's say imagine that that's the grades that the students actually got. It's not the grades they got, but you can see that you can actually start to get some grades in. Now he got a U here, so our calculated grade's gone a little bit awry. So why has this gone awry? Should be just all of them added together, shouldn't it? Okay. So it's actually below the threshold for an E, so it calculated it as a U. Yeah, sorry about that. Right, okay, back to it. So you can see that you can get a calculated grade, and that's satisfactory. Now, if there are other factors, you look at that calculated grade and you think, well, you know, it's given this kid an A. There's no way they're an A grade student. Well, then you adjust it. So we're looking at the things that would affect the various papers that the students would ordinarily take in an exam. Now, you could adjust it. You could adjust it according to if a student's done some exceptional work between the lockdown and now. Well, you could say, well, actually, they're starting to show that they're doing a lot better. But you've got to treat it with a little bit of suspicion, because the chances are that student has most likely used textbooks and used online guides, or maybe downloaded mark schemes. Use your judgment a little bit on it, but use a little bit of caution. I think the stuff that's been sort of submitted recently, that's worth it if you think that's really strong evidence for being able to move the grade up by a grade. So have a think about that. Tell me what you think. Tell me if there's still questions. I want to basically, by the end of next week, I want to be able to give you guys some really clear instructions as to exactly what's needed. What will happen is that the grades will then be submitted back to Mr. Oliver and myself. Then the two of us will actually have a look through them all, because we do have to sign a document that says that we're satisfied that these have been properly awarded. So I better check them, because I'm signing my name saying I have. And then they'll be submitted centrally. Just to try and make everyone's life a little bit easier, and obviously take away a lot of the pressure. That's the plan. As I said, the thing I'm going to say that I really want people to do is to have the sort of sheet split into two tabs here. So one of them being the grade and the rank. So for example, where we've got 3D grades here, if you look at the number of points scored, because it calculates a number based on these, what my system does, 25, 23, and 23.85. So that should be 1, 2, and 3. And then be old 1, 2, and 3. So they're ranked. Makes our lives a lot easier. If you get Excel to do the calculation for you, it makes your life a lot easier. I've added a little note in there because there's because a student maybe has been asked to leave. Obviously that's confidential. I can tell you as teachers, I would rather that didn't sort of escape out into the wider school community, please. So I hope that's helpful. I think I'll stop warbling there. I think you've had enough of me after the 20 minutes I've talked about of setting online lessons. I think you've probably had enough. So I will end there. Have a really good weekend, everyone.